Good evening. Call the meeting to order on March 17, 2020, regular meeting of the Garner Town Council. Thank you all for being here this evening, and thank the council members for appearing as well. We'll say a little bit more about some of the items on the business agenda, but I do want to call your attention to the fact that this council is just very conscious of some of the rules and regulations as it relates to the day and times which we live. And so we've tried to space ourselves out a little bit more tonight. So if you're missing some folks at the dais, our two assistant town managers are sitting in the front row, and Mr. Baggett, our attorney, is there, so we all have a little more space. Madam Clerk, at this time, I'll ask you to call the roll.
Mayor Marshburn.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Behringer. Here. Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember Dellinger.
Here.
Councilmember Singleton.
Here.
And Councilmember Vance.
Here.
Thank you. If you will, at this time, if you're able to, please rise, and we will have our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. It's my pleasure to introduce to you for our invocation this evening the Reverend Wayne Dubansky. In the spirit of the St. Patrick's Day, he said I could refer to him as O. Dubansky. So, but either name will go well. He is the pastor of the Lord of Life Lutheran Church and a good friend, person I've known for a number of years. So, Reverend Dubansky, if you would come at this time and lead us in our invocation, I would deeply appreciate that.
Let us bow our hearts in prayer. Loving God, we come together at this time asking for your blessing and help as the town council gathers to decide best how to serve this people of this community. We pray that they would have your guidance as to how to conduct their work in the St. Francis spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Help them to show the way by which all people are served, the comfortable and the uncomfortable and those in between, and all of us who are affected by the coronavirus, directly or otherwise. Instill in them the power to minimize the virus's effects upon this community. And so now in the spirit of St. Francis, an Irish blessing for all of us. May the Lord rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall soft upon your fields, and may God hold you in the palm of his hands. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. We really appreciate you coming out tonight. Okay, the next section on our agenda is something we call petitions and comments. Usually I have some prefacing comments to make, but those will be reserved unless we have someone this evening. Madam Clerk, did we have anybody sign up? Okay, we did not. So if there's someone in the audience who at this point in time would like to come and offer comments, at this time would be a good time to come to the podium. Seeing and hearing none, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. Council, do I hear a motion that we adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
I have one
Oh, excuse me,
item to
yes.
add.
I'm sorry, the
Before
town
I'm
manager did
sorry.
caution me that. Tell us that
All right.
change, if you will.
In light of things that are going on and some time-sensitive information we needed to get to you, we wanted to add the health care update to the meeting and want to move it to the first item under new old business. It will be presented to you tonight, and you can decide whether you want to take action or wait to a later date, but we wanted to go ahead and get the information out to you.
This is an update on the health insurance.
The health
program?
employee health
Employee
insurance, yes, yes.
Okay, and you're suggesting it be the number one item under new and old business?
Correct, and it was scheduled to come before you at the work session, but we decided to move it up, especially in light of the several cancellations we had, that it would be timely to do it now.
Okay, with that change noted, would those who motioned accept that as part of your motion? Okay, Ms. Behringer and Mr. Singleton
Mr. Mayor.
properly seconded the motion.
I'd like to remove the item from the consent agenda and add it to the agenda. It's a very tight time frame item of that contract, and I think that we might need to hear some information on how the situation now is affecting the time frame for that contract and that scope of work for the space needs study.
Okay, I'm not sure if I followed you completely, Mr. Dellinger. Were you wanting to add something?
Oh, to pull out of the consent agenda.
Oh, excuse me, pull a
Yeah.
consent agenda item. Okay, and what numbered item is that, sir?
Number 1, under consent.
Okay, maybe the only one there, yeah, okay. So, all right, the motion has been amended to, well, I tell you what, since we
You're right.
usually approve that separately, let's just do that when we get to the consent item, okay? So right now, properly before us is the adoption of the agenda with the changes noted. It's been properly motion made and seconded. Any further discussion by council? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, no. And it is so ordered. Okay, we are now at the point of the agenda where we have several presentations that were listed, if you're following on your agenda, that have been postponed or canceled. I believe items 1, 2, and 3 have all been postponed to a later time. Am I right on that, Madam Clerk? Okay, so the remaining item is Mr. Chief Poole, who will come and make his annual Garner Fire and Rescue report. Welcome, Mr. Poole.
Thank you, sir. I've got some hard copies of our information as well. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, especially with everything we are going through. And so I'll be glad to go over. I've got 3 pieces of information for our annual report to the town tonight, and then I'll be glad during or after to answer any questions regarding our information or anything regarding emergency response with the current situation. The first report I'd like to go over is our public annual report. So each year in January, we analyze the previous calendar year's information and post it publicly on our website for the community to see what happened in our department the previous year. I'm proud to say that each year this report gets more thorough and detailed as we go along. So there's a couple definite statistics I'd like to talk about in this one, and then as I said, we'll move on. I've got 2 other pieces of information just to share with you tonight. Again, this information can be located by the public on our website. It is located on the main page of www.garnerfire.com. And it's been on our website, I think, since the end of January when our board approved the report. So just some call stats to go over to try to get the citizens, our stakeholders, familiarized with our department. Overall, our calls for service in 2019, we responded to 5,564. That was a 6.36% increase from 2018, which was 5,231. Typically in the fire service, we project somewhere in between 2 and 3% of call volume increase each year. This year we had a higher than normal, and we are assessing that mainly due to AVL, or closest unit response, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. Then we try to break down that data into our 4 fire stations. So you can see on the small chart in the middle from 2018, and then what percent change each station had. All 3 stations, all 3 of the 4 stations, with the exception of Station 2, received an increased number of calls, and Station 2 had a minor decrease of 3.6% in call volume. And then we normally break our calls out into how many calls are run inside the city limits of Garner versus in our unincorporated area. So you can see within the town limits, last year we responded to 3,344 calls, and in the unincorporated area of Wake County, 1,983. And then we provided mutual aid response to 237 responses to other departments that requested our assistance. Just some friendly information about call stats. So we try to analyze how many calls we are running per month. to see if we have any major spikes in months and try to determine why. For us, you will see some ebb and flows, but generally speaking, by month, we don't have any major outlier months. Certainly different types of calls increase during the summer versus the winter, but call volume month to month is generally pretty much the same. Day of the week, again, so you can see that, Tuesday is our biggest day of the week in 2019, but on average, we don't have any major outlier days. Sunday has generally been our slowest day, and that's mainly due to travel and citizens being off work and those sorts of things. Average demand by hour, we are analyzing this more and more as time goes on. EMS has utilized this many years before the fire service. They've actually adjusted their schedule to handle peak load times. So this is something that's fairly new to the fire service we're looking at to analyze what is our busiest time of the day, when do we see the spikes, and so you can kind of see on a 24-hour period where the calls fall. Mutual aid type, so we try to see, are we responding to another department or are they coming to us more? So we gave mutual aid 274 times, but we received mutual aid into our department 545 times. So our partners are assisting us with our demand almost twice as much as what we are giving out. Types of situations that we find, generally speaking, the majority of our calls, anywhere from 60 to 70%, depending on the time we analyze it, is first responder calls or medical by nature. So last year was 3,651 calls. And then we talk about actual fires. Last year we had 176 actual fires in our district. And then it breaks down into some other types of calls and conditions. The next piece of information outside this report, I'll show you, it breaks this down even more. So if you've got questions on types of calls, wait for that second piece of information and then we can certainly talk about it. But we identify where medical calls are broke down in smaller categories. So then unit by demand, trying to determine our staff units. All 4 of our stations are staffed 24 hours a day. We have 5 designated companies, 4 engines, and 1 ladder/rescue company. And so we're trying to determine how much demand are on those units as well. And that allows us to look at vehicle maintenance, reallocation of resources, and those type of things. Demand and reliability of each station is important to us to make sure one station isn't running an overabundance of call versus another station. So those are just the total number of calls. So GFE would be Garner Fire Engine. That would be 1, Station 1, 2, 4, Ladder 1, Ladder 3, which is Engine 3, Rescue 1, Rescue 2, and then our battalion chief, who is the supervisor of the operational shift. So a little bit about, especially when in regards to accreditation and response time. So this is very important to us in making sure that we're responding in a timely manner, and then how can we improve this as time goes on. So I did a presentation last year to you about response time. There are several ways you can analyze it, and there's several different pieces to it. The first piece is call processing. So when you have a problem and you pick up the phone and dial 911, from the time that they answer the phone to the time that they notify us of a call is called call processing time. And in the past, we've had very little control over that, but going through our accreditation process, we've started to try to analyze the communication system. But right now we're looking at 90% of the time, or 90 times out of 100, that processing time is 3 minutes and 25 seconds. Well, that to our standards is fairly high. So we're trying to analyze how can we decrease that time. We'd like it somewhere around 2 minutes if possible. Then next is travel time. So once we receive that call, how long does it take us to respond from the fire station to where the need is? We can't ask our staff to travel any faster, so we're trying to analyze how long does it take us to get there. And 90% of the time, our travel time throughout our district is 6 minutes and 16 seconds. We have almost 80 square miles of district. It is the second largest district in Wake County outside of Raleigh. And then the total response time, so just looking at from the time the call comes in to the time we get there, is 90% of the time 9 minutes and 50 seconds. And one of the main goals of accreditation is how to improve those times. Just some accomplishments through the year. The town graciously approved a new assistant chief position, and I'll show you some of the fruits of that labor on our next slide. We reviewed and updated every one of our standard operating guidelines and policies and procedures this year. And then the one thing as far as operations is the county has implemented a closest unit dispatch. So now there's a GPS unit on every fire truck. And so where in the past, if a call was in Station 1's district, Station 1 responded to the call. It didn't matter where they were, if they were out training or on another call. Well, now it's GPS enabled. So Station 1, if a call generates in Station 1's territory and they're out somewhere or they're further away than Engine 3 actually takes the call. And it's simplistic in nature, but that alters the culture of the fire service. So that's something that happened in May of 19, and we've tried to improve upon our services and improve our response times by having GPS-enabled trucks. Cancer prevention is a big issue. So one of our firefighters came to you, I think, almost a month ago and talked about cancer prevention. So we were able to incorporate particulate barrier hoods for our firefighters, develop a decontamination policy, and I'll just hit the second set of turnout boots. That was part of that as well. The town and the county graciously approved a ladder quint type unit that went in service of our Station 3 in October of 19. We replaced some, I think what the public mainly knows is the jaws of life. We replaced some of those tools, and then we were able to purchase ballistic vests and active shooter helmets for some of our staff to respond and train with Garner PD this year on active shooter incidents. Our Fireman's Day Festival was very successful this year. We raised $25,000 to donate directly to the North Carolina J.C. Burn Center, and mainly for after-burn care. We provided fire prevention to over 1,000 adults and almost 3,000 children. And I'm going to talk about property loss value on our next slide, so I'll hold that. And then I'll skip, this is just for our internal members to know about some of the extra things that are on our calendar throughout the year. We've tried to improve professional development and training outside of normal continuing education. So these are just some examples of some schools that we have funded and sent some of our staff to last year. They're mostly national and state type conferences. We did a small narrative of our new assistant chief, and I hope one night to bring him here and introduce him to council. So there's some information if you're interested on the person that we hired for our assistant chief position. And then we also identified some goals for 2020. We want to improve our officer development program. We'd like to complete our accreditation process by becoming an applicant agency. We hopefully will have installed ventilation systems in all of our bays to remove vehicle exhaust out of those once the vehicle is started and pulls out of the fire station. We'd like to continue merger discussion with the town of Garner, and we'd like to continue development and discussions of Station 5 and our relocation of our Station 2. There's a brief message from myself regarding the public, and then some turnout time stats. So that is our public document, and then the other document that I'd like to go over, maybe if you have some questions or comments, is it's a new report that we've created this year. Our new assistant chief created it, called Garner Fire Rescue by the Numbers. Essentially, we're using it as a one-page document where we can go out to the public, civic groups, and explain with 1 page or less really the meat and the potatoes of our organization. So we serve 65,000 people, 75 square miles. We have the highest call volume of any county department outside of Raleigh. We total of almost 10,000 unit responses, 4 fire stations, and our current personnel, there's 6 operation and 5.5 administrative. So on the previous document, when you were looking at our types of calls, this breaks those calls down in more visually appealing and different categories that we think the public, would understand. So how many actual house fires did we have? There were 66. There were 51 car fires, 43 brush fires. So we take that total number of fires and break it out where you can see what those firefighters do on a daily basis. So then the one thing, the turnout time, which we went over, the save calculation. So this is new for us as well. It's been really hard for the fire service to determine how much property we're saving versus how much we're losing. And so we've improved our process. So every time that we go out and we respond to property, we calculate what the property value is, and then we try to determine if we have a fire, what damage is done. Here's what I'm very proud of this statistic for this department in our community. Last year alone, we went to almost over $20 million worth of property and only lost $1.5 million. That means we saved right at $19 million worth of property. So our save loss percentage, when you're looking, last year we saved 92.37% of the property we responded to. And that certainly is congratulations to our staff on the job they do and the things that they respond to every day. And then the right is a summary of a lot of the information that was on that last report. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you've got about our data or our Garner Fire Rescue by the numbers page.
Matt, just under medical, and in particular under traffic accidents, in terms of calls that you make, what would the area be that you respond to traffic accidents? I mean, is it, obviously it's in town, is it essentially the same as the calls for the fires that you attend to as well, or is it different?
You're referring to like what geographic location are we responding to?
Yeah.
So when you talk about our traffic accidents, the majority of them are I-40 and US 70 and 401. So our district starts at exit 301, which is the belt line, and goes all the way to 312, which is 42 highway. We have essentially 12 miles of I-40. US 70 is from Mechanical Boulevard almost to the Walmart in Clayton, where right at the county line, we respond to those two are, 20, 25 miles of highway district and then 401. So along with PD, that's probably the majority of our wrecks that occur on those roads.
You would go south on 401?
We go south on
controllable
401 to 1010. That is the town of Fuquay takes over at that area.
Go ahead.
Well,
Mr.
the new
Matthews.
southern loop coming through, Chief, what are you looking coverage for, and it goes all the way over to I-40, all the way over to 401. How much of that is going to be coming under your control?
So for the 540, it would pick up at 401. I guess looking at it conceptually, we would pick up at 401 and 1010, somewhere in that area. And then we would respond all the way until it crosses 50 Highway and Cleveland School Road. Somewhere there would be, I would suspect, would be the end of our area. However, we have some parts of I-40 and the US 70 bypass. So where it comes across there, we would more likely pick up more district as it goes towards Knightdale. That part, the piece from Apex to Cleveland is that's what we're really focusing on, but long term we would have more of a southern piece as well.
This is a curiosity question for me. I don't know if you have the hazmat spills that you mentioned there. Can you give us an example of some of the hazardous materials that you are confronting when you go to those kinds of things?
Yeah, so when you're looking at hazmat, we have several target areas of our district. So we have a railroad, right? So the railway sometimes creates a target hazard for hazmat. Your I-40 does, so if we have a tractor trailer or, commercial box truck or things like that hauling. It depends on when they wreck. Those can be hazmat calls as well. We have some facilities, Safety Clean is a commercial type facility in our district that deals in chemicals, pergofluorine, so it just varies. But if you're analyzing them, I think probably the majority of those are vehicle accidents. If we have a fuel leak over 5 gallons, that's considered a hazmat call. So a lot of those are accidents by nature.
And I guess I was sort of asking what types of hazardous materials are coming through our area on trucks or trains or whatever.
So on trains, when we're looking at the chemicals, one that we have a large number of box trucks that comes through is anhydrous ammonia. So that's a chemical used in cooling and refrigeration. It was part of the issue at ConAgra when the explosion. So that's a target hazard when with the railway, and then I-40, it can be anything. So it's, but that's just an example of one specific on the railway would be anhydrous ammonia.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, let's see, Gray, do you have any questions going this way? Bellinger or
Just a
Mr. Rance?
quick question about the railway. Is there minimums and maximum speed they're allowed to come through Garner?
Yes, they are allowed to come through Garner at 59 miles an hour. They petitioned for that many, many years ago, and it was granted, so it's a done deal.
I don't know if the chief, yeah, do you care to elaborate on that, or?
I would agree, Ms. Barringer.
Okay. All right, no other questions?
And then I just had one more piece of information. Our board had asked in our annual report that we identify some areas of future growth in which I'm sure most of you are aware. We had the planning department highlight all the approved development that's come through the town TRC in regards to 401 highway. Some of this is already there. Some of this is just been come through first review. But we wanted to identify in that area where we're having difficulty response, and in which I know the council's aware. We don't have a cut through of 401, so we have to go from our Station 3 to Old Stage to Legend Road, or either Station 2 to 1010. So this area here we identified and asked the planning department to visually show us all the plans and possible housing units that could potentially be developed. So we got that map and analyzed it, and it's over 4,000 units that could be there. And people calculate population differently. The fire service uses 2.5 per unit, so that's almost 10,000 people. When you're building a fire station or designing a new fire station in general, there's a couple rule of thumbs. Generally, you need a population of 10,000 people. So that just in your future development alone meets that need, not counting the existing population there. You want to generate at least 500 calls a year. So we're anticipating here with that development being almost 1,800. We were looking at 700 with existing development then. So that's just something that we wanted to make sure in our annual report that we're identifying as these developments occur, that we make sure you understand it will be very difficult for us to meet municipal response times in some of those areas. So this is really, really good for the economy and the town and development, and we support it, but that's a lot of units, and we don't have a direct means of getting there. So. And I'll be glad to answer any other questions about the presentation tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share our story of last year. We had a great year, and hopefully next year's report will be even more detailed.
Chief, I will ask you one other question, and actually I guess it was the assistant chief was here at our special meeting just this past weekend. Obviously, all citizens everywhere, I guess, are much aware of the coronavirus and the implications of that. You're familiar with any number of actions the town has taken in that regard. Do you see any particular challenges within the fire department that I'm sure you're addressing those, but any things that you could tell us about here? You feel like you're fully prepared? And
well, I don't think anybody's fully prepared. Sure. I will be honest with that, but I think our department is doing the best we can. It has consumed more administrative time than I had ever imagined. we completed a continuity of operations today and just reflected on the last 2 weeks and the amount of hours that have gone into planning this. I think if you're asking challenges for us, it is today, the major challenge we dealt with today is how do we make sure the firefighters have food? So as the public is home and the restaurants close, the grocery stores become more bare and bare. So they live at a fire station for 24 hours a day. We generally do not provide their food. And so it is, if this is continue to get worse, today we have looked at other resources, how to make sure that they've got food and provisions. Another thing is us, if our people are exposed, if they have not gone home yet, an area to quarantine them. So we've taken some unorthodox measures and located some rental property in our district that we will be able to put an engine company or two in, so they don't have to go home. If they've already been home and are not showing signs and symptoms, we may quarantine them at home. But if they've not been home and we're able to identify this, it's my decision not to send them home. But we're certainly met with challenges. I think the administration is more worried about it than the line staff. This is not their first or last dangerous call they've gone to, so they've been very positive and optimistic about it. We just want to make sure that they've got what they need, and I think that's our challenge. But I've met with the town at every one of their functions. The town manager's done a great job of keeping us in the loop and passing information, and we're trying to mirror our policies and procedures with the town as well. Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Thank you very
sir,
much.
for a good report.
Yes,
We
sir.
appreciate the good work you and your department does on a regular basis, for sure. Okay, we are now to the section of consent agenda, and let's see, since there's one, I believe, Councilmember Dellinger, you desire for us to, in essence, move that into an area of discussion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Let me see, let's see, so I guess we need to vote. We're taking that off consent. Council, how do you weigh in on that? Well, you're making the motion that we take it off consent and put it in, okay? Second for that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just make it the last item in new old business?
That's what, yeah, I was gonna
Okay.
suggest we do. Why don't we do that? Make it the last item under new and old business. All in favor of moving that item into our regular agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. We'll put it in the last topic down there, Mr. Dellinger. Okay, we are now to the section of the agenda under new and old business, and I believe per the town manager's preference and the way we designated the place on the agenda, we will now hear from the health care update, and that will be Mr.
B.D. Seckler,
excuse me.
the
Yes,
Human
Seckler.
Resources Director.
Excuse me, yes. Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
And were you able to provide information any copies of the presentation for them? Or?
I thought you had said it was in their packet.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
had said-
They got it as an email, but we can get copies made for them.
Okay.
Sorry.
As soon as I finish
Yeah, we'll get copies.
with my presentation, I'll make copies then. I
I'll
apologize.
get no, that's my fault. I'll get one of the assistants to make copies for them if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
You
want-
can go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll catch up with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry
No,
about that. I
They
guess,
got it in an email, but they don't have it in front of them printed. Sorry.
Well, I thank you for your flexibility in allowing us to present tonight. And again, I apologize for you not having the slides in front of you as we go through this. As usual, standing to my right is Mr. Paul Sidor from Independent Benefit Advisors. He is an invaluable resource in terms of supporting me and supporting the town with regards to our benefits. So between the two of us tonight, our intent is to share with you our recommendations with regards to our benefits renewal for the fiscal year 2021 year. As you recall, Mr. Sidor and I stood before you at the end of January, provided you with some updates with regards to the plans that we had in place some of the information that we had at this point. And now we're here to share with you our final recommendations and details with regards to that. So feel free to stop me at any time. The two of us will run through this presentation and hopefully share with you some good, interesting information. A little bit of an executive summary. We're going to cover 5 different areas tonight. We'll start off in the presentation and I'll talk in more detail about our health plan. Aetna has returned to us a negative 5% renewal rate on our health premiums for fiscal year 2021. And in some of the detailed attachments, you will see that in essence, the premiums that we're paying this year, every premium will be 5% less for fiscal year 2021. On our dental plan, unfortunately, we're looking at about a 7.3% increase in our dental costs. Life and disability insurance, no change. COBRA and Flexible Spending Administration, no change. And a program that's already been implemented as of January 1st was our Retiree Medicare Part D, which is the prescription plan, and we realized a 20.2% decrease in our costs associated with that. So those are the plans we're going to be talking about. Those are the changes financially, and I'll go into a little bit of the detail behind each one of those. So starting with the health plan, as I mentioned, a 5% decrease in our premium costs with no benefits changes. We maintain the same levels of contributions, 100% paid by the town for our individual premiums for staff, and a 35.1% contribution for the dependent premiums is paid for by the town as well. We are going to continue to offer what we have called our dual option health plan, which first is the traditional plan, and then the plan that we implemented last year, which was a choice plan, which has lower costs, but it also has higher deductibles and copays. Staff members have the opportunity to choose between those two plans based on what works best for their circumstances. On the dental plan, regretfully, as I mentioned a moment ago, we are looking at a 7.3% increase in what we call our premium equivalent. Just to remind you, we're self-insured on our dental plan. We are currently using a 12-month rolling average of March 1st of 2019 through February 29th of this year. We're running at a 105% claims loss ratio. Again, to refresh the memories, 100% would be that everything that we pay out, we receive back in premium equivalent. So anything over 100 means that we're not taking in as much money, we're paying out more in claims. That claims data represents, in our estimation, going forward, about a 7.3% increase to cover those costs and make sure that we get as close as we can to that 100% ratio. We use Delta Dental as our administrator of our program. We have a 3-year rate guarantee on their costs, and that rate year guarantee goes through June of 2022. Life and disability insurance, no change in premium costs. We use an organization called Reliance Standard. They provide our life insurance, our accidental death and dismemberment, and our short-term disability programs for staff members. They have a 2-year rate guarantee, and that runs through June of 2021. Our COBRA and our flexible spending accounts, we use an organization called InfiniSource. We have a 3-year rate hold through 2022. They do our COBRA administration, our flexible spending accounts, and again, no changes for the upcoming year with regards to their administrative costs. And last but not least, this is the program I talked about that has already been implemented as of January 1st of 2020. That is our Medicare Part D, the prescription drug coverage. We were successful in transitioning all of our Medicare retirees from Blue Cross Blue Shield to a program under United Healthcare. And as a result of that, we realized a 20.2% decrease in our premium costs. And again, that is for our Medicare prescription drug coverage, and the town pays 100% of that for our retirees. The timeline, again, I did not change the timeline in terms of this presentation, even though we're doing it 2 weeks early. In terms of our layout, we would ask that as we move forward, your consideration with approval of our recommendations no later than the April 6th council meeting. That allows us to complete all of the steps that we need to complete to begin open enrollment, which would run from May 4th of 2020 through May 25th of 2020. And in typical fashion, those are in-person presentations. We've already taken some steps associated with the current environment to look at possibly videotaping that session and then getting that video of the presentations out to each staff member. And then all of our open enrollment changes that are made during that period of time by our staff members becomes effective July 1 of 2020, the start of our new fiscal year. That is everything that I wanted to present to you tonight in this form. As the town manager has indicated, I will get you copies of the slides that I just presented, as well as all of the detailed exhibits that weren't intended to be part of my presentation, but I want to make sure that you have those to look through that data as well. Beyond that, are there any questions that I or Mr. Sidor could answer for you tonight
And
with
if you
regards
get-
to our
If you can
recommendations?
get to the email that I sent you yesterday, all of those charts are in there. So if you can get to those on your tablet, you can see those.
Okay, yeah, I believe we do have some questions, and I'll start with Mr. Singleton.
Yes, sir.
Yes, BD, so the 5% decrease on healthcare, 7.3 increase on dental, 20% decrease on Medicare Part D. What is that as far as a bottom line on dollars? How much more or less is that than compared to what we're paying this year?
For the medical, the 5% decrease represents savings of about $119,000 for the town. And for employees, about $12,500, and that's an annual amount. And then for the dental, the increase is 7.3%, represents an increase of $4,600 for the town, and for employees, about $2,900. And the employees are paying for their dependents, and that's where their expense is incurred. And for the retiree Medicare drug plan, the annual savings for the town is about $6,500. And the retirees are also experiencing some out-of-pocket savings, but those are not as easy to quantify because it is particular to each retiree and the specific drugs they're taking.
For the town, from a budget standpoint for the next year's budget, 2021, it's about $121,000 less.
For the health care.
The healthcare,
Yes, sir.
dental, and everything else, about $120,000 less, give or take. All right, thank you.
So that does include the dental increase,
Increase.
right? Okay.
Yes, about 4.
119 less 4,600 plus 6,500, you're
Yeah,
about
so it's a
120,
wash there,
121, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, let me see. Ms. Behringer, do you have any questions, comments? Mr. Matthews, I believe Mr. Vance. No questions. At least Mr. Dellinger.
Given the current environment, what is the potential impact on the industry as a whole for the next fiscal year in terms of premium increases? And with regards to the town specifically, what are the potential implications for what is occurring on the increase in health insurance next year?
You want to speak to that?
Sure. And you were asking about the impact of the virus on
Yes.
our health. The insurance companies, I think at the urging of the National Administration, have upped their benefit. They're covering the testing for the virus at 100%, so no out-of-pocket cost for the employees who would, and their covered dependents who would get the testing. The treatment, should they fall ill and have a doctor's appointment or need a prescription drug, will fall under the provisions of the normal contract, any copayment that they might have for a doctor's appointment or copayment for a drug. We can expect that if a lot of people do fall ill to the virus, seek the medical care, that this will cause increased claims and utilization that would be reflected in, our loss ratios being somewhat higher than they would otherwise. To the extent, or what extent that will be, remains to be seen. I think we're all optimistic, but there are some reasons for concern. We also are operating in a bit of a good bubble here, particular to the town of Garner. You remember, for a few years in a row there, we were coming here with rather significant rate increases. They have resolved themselves, and we are now experiencing very good claims information, or claims loss ratios. So, we might just continue, our good luck streak may just continue. But it all remains to be seen. I'm sorry that I didn't have more definite information for you.
I mean, I guess in essence, it would behoove us as a town to continue to take as many measures possible to protect staff so that there aren't as many claims going into the following years. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, indeed. Yes.
And we've started enacting some of those measures through our wellness program, some of the screenings that we offer as an incentive for lower cost, and some of the other programs we put in place to help with that. So,
But as aggressive, we can be as aggressive as possible with protecting staff for future financial implications later, correct? Yeah, thank you.
PD, would this be a time or to speak to the issue of the health assessments and stuff that staff went through? I guess that's all
Sure.
completed by now, is that right?
Yep. Well, everything's not completed, but we're still working through that process. And what the mayor is referring to is, as I mentioned a moment ago, as a town, we pay 100% of the premiums, the individual staff premiums for each of our staff members. Over the last 3 years, we have put in place several steps in which staff members have to complete certain steps to receive a reward, that reward being 100% town contribution. 2 years ago, we started with a health assessment questionnaire. We again used that last year as a required action for that reward. This year, we implemented a health screening. We had basically 3 on-site clinics where the clinicians came in, did basic blood pressure checks, a finger prick to do some blood testing, as well as height and weight measurements. And then we're also continuing with the questionnaire this year. All of those actions need to be completed by March 31st by each staff member that voluntarily wants to do that. And if they so choose to do so, then they receive that reward rate, which is 100% town contribution towards their monthly premiums.
Provide a brief oversight or assessment. I assume a large majority of employees are taking advantage of that?
Yes, sir. Yep. We've had a very large majority of our staff members that presented for the on-site clinics. And while we're still working through the questionnaires, which aren't due until the 31st of March, we've had a very high participation rate up to this point. I would say that we're probably about 60% participation up to this point, with still, I guess, 2 weeks from today would be the deadline for completing both of those steps.
Okay. Anything further to add? No. Anything else? Thank you both. Good to
Thank
see you
you.
again, sir. Appreciate you coming, and we'll get you out early, I guess. Huh?
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate your flexibility and your time.
Thank you.
and is council comfortable seeing that on the April 6th?
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, that's the intent, is to have this come back on the consent agenda No discussion at that time probably, and we'll be good to move, okay? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, next up is Mr. Franks. Third quarter update. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the FY20 third quarter review, which just as a reminder is an update on the current financial year, the current budget year, and how we're doing. So we'll do a revenue and expenditure review, discuss funding options, and then finalize funding decisions. And I'll just go ahead and say at the onset, there were kind of two different presentations within this. The presentation I put together when it was entered into your packet, and then things have obviously changed fairly dramatically. So you did receive an additional slide on your table that highlights some of those changes that we'll also be talking about as well, just based on the virus and different things that are potentially coming up. But we'll still go through all the other information, and you can ask questions based on that, but that will kind of be the ultimate update. So on revenue estimates, FY22 revenues were projected to be about $45.4 million, or almost $1 million, or 2.2% over the current budget. And a significant amount of that was related to higher than anticipated development-related revenues, sales tax, and real estate revenue. So real estate is based on what Wake County provides. We use their estimate, but sales tax and development-related fees were showing good signs of economic growth. People were spending more, obviously, than they had for the sales tax growth, additional population. And then a lot of the development-related fees were related to either the planning of future growth in terms of working with the planning department, engineering to get plans through, or inspections going out and actually inspecting homes or buildings or other structures. This was somewhat offset, the growth, based on a lower than anticipated sales and service tax revenue. That was primarily, we did budget for the rec center to be operational and to be fully generating revenue. So that was a lower than anticipated revenue. And I just wanted to point out that this does not include revenues associated with fee in lieu of parkland, which, as a reminder, developers can pay that fee up front. Then that gives the town an opportunity to use that funding for the development of newer, the planning of new parks. So that was a $350,000 amount or so that was not included. We don't budget for that because it is for a dedicated purpose, but I just wanted to note that. On the expenditure side, they were projected to be $43.4 million, which was a decrease of about $470,000 or 1.6% from the budgeted level. And the savings were primarily based on position turnover and miscellaneous operating savings. I would point out that's not a significant amount of savings on the expenditure side. We are, and on the revenue side as well, getting more and more close to not being right on. We have some level of flexibility, but at this point it is fairly limited. It's on almost 1%, which is on a $44 million budget, not a significant amount. And I just noted here that a portion of additional savings were based on the delayed opening of the recreation center. So that was kind of a canceling out effect, where we aren't having the revenue, but we also aren't having all the costs associated with actually operating the rec center. So in terms of funding recommendations, the initial recommendation was to utilize sales tax revenue to fund potential shortfalls in finance and IT. If you'll remember, when we developed last year's budget, the finance department had experienced significant staff turnover, so we had to make a variety of assumptions based on when staff would start, how much salary they would make, what kind of insurance they would have, and then there were some other operational impacts that were just under budget, so there were some potential shortfall there. And on the IT side, there were some changes in the group insurance selections. We've identified some other savings since this time, so IT should be fine, but there will likely be need to be some sort of financial adjustment on the finance side just to shore up those some of those shortfalls. And at this time, we had no other recommendations. We did have some other thoughts, and this was originally what we were going to talk mostly about. So there are a variety of other requirements that the funds could have been used for. When we have higher than anticipated revenues or lower than anticipated expenditures, we could appropriate the additional revenue or reallocate the expenditure authority. We could have used perform requirements, so that's the public facilities repair and maintenance. So, putting on Avery Sheet roof or things along those lines, doing maintenance on town facilities. Last year, we deferred a variety of police vehicles as part of the budget process, so that would have been something we could have potentially done. And then there are a variety of one-time requirements in the FY21 budget that could have been met with these additional resources. From staff's perspective, that they were based on the significant number of unknown items in the 21 budget process. So what we are going to do with the revaluation, the potential impact of bond funding and making decisions related to that, from an operational perspective in terms of, the impacts, the projects we are going to fund in the bond referendum are going to have an operating budget, but then also how we're going to generate revenue potentially for the bond referendum. And then final operating decisions, just trying to determine what things we are going to fund as part of the budget. Based on all those factors, we felt like it was necessary to hold off on making any adjustments at this point to allow some of those decisions to be made and then to potentially come back. Since that time, which was only about a week ago, there has been a variety of potential impacts based on COVID-19 that now we feel even more certain that those spending adjustments, in particular increases in spending adjustment, should be made. So there are a variety of potential financial impacts, obviously sales tax, development revenues, recreation fees, and I should have included interest income as well. Obviously our investments will not be doing as well. And unfortunately, in particular for sales tax, which is approximately 20% of our revenue overall from the general funds, we really won't have the information we'll need to make decisions or to really get a feel of the true impact for an extended period of time. Sales tax is 3 months behind. So in March, we just got the numbers for December. So we're still going to get 2 more months of essentially nothing happening, where there's going to potentially likely be normal, and we were seeing good growth. So we wouldn't be able to identify any types of trends in terms of sales tax until realistically it's too late and we're pretty far into the year. And it would potentially be on the same on some of the other items. I talked to some of the development service folks, and they felt like they would have a fairly good feel maybe pretty soon, but that those developers were also trying to feel things out and get a feel of, if people are going to still buy houses, they're still going to build houses, but they didn't quite know what was going to go on. So there's just a lot of uncertainty in terms of potential impacts on the revenue side of the house within the town. So based on this, staff is recommending a variety of spending reductions to mitigate against potential revenue shortfalls. Again, this is within the current year. So we are considering reviewing vacant positions and only hiring critical staff. So this would be as positions are currently vacant or as they become vacant, performing a review and just making sure that those positions are truly necessary to be filled. The town does not have any positions that are not necessary, but making sure they are truly critical given the unknown circumstances that we may face in the future. Having the town manager review all capital expenses over $5,000 prior to items being purchased. That's obviously going to be a large amount of the budget in terms of really getting savings. You're not going to save a significant amount of money by restricting office supply purchases. You can get a couple $1,000s here, but you really do need to kind of hone in on those big ticket items. We have and will reduce travel and training costs based mostly on the restrictions that have been put in place in terms of what staff is able to do in travel. So that's something that should be beneficial to us. And then we are recommending that staff reviews upcoming projects, and this would be general fund projects. This is not bond projects. That has a dedicated revenue source, and bond dollars need to be spent for those purposes. But potential general fund projects within departments that could be deferred, and at least have discussions and to kind of review those on an individual basis to see if there are any that need to be deferred as part of this process. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, I have one, and then I'll defer to council. Is there a particular monetary amount that you're shooting for in terms of spending reductions, or you're just hoping to review things and take these measures and say what you can, or
Yeah, I think there's so much uncertainty in terms of what will happen and how this is going to ultimately impact the town's revenue sources, and the fact that we won't have the information we need to really, I mean, we can model it based on past recessions that have happened and things like that, but this is obviously fairly atypical of anything that's happened, especially for anything that we're going to have data for. So just trying to, without truly impacting the town's operations, make cuts where we can. Fortunately that we are 3/4 of the way through the year, and revenues did come in pretty well, and we're coming in, and it was looking good. So it's not as if it's the very beginning of the year where we might have the significant challenges, but we just want to be proactive and identifies ways where we can save, if at all possible. So no target as much as just trying to be as smart as possible.
Okay, I'll start with Mr. Dellinger.
Yeah, because I'd really like to try to nail down a number for the fourth quarter. I've always, from other stuff we've gotten from you, I've been impressed with your ability to do projections and estimates. I think it might be a good starting point to look at the fourth quarter sales tax revenue from last year. Look at sort of the trend that we were on, and then sort of reduce that number by 80% maybe, and sort of see, because I think we're entering into a period probably over the next few months where there will be that significant of a reduction. And that might give us at least a ballpark. Are we talking 100, 200,000? Are we talking 600,000? It's always hard to project, and a lot of times going back a year can give at least a range.
Yeah, and I can definitely and will run some worst case scenario. I mean, sales tax does come in at several $100,000 a month. So an 80% reduction over the course of several months would be, seven figures. So it would be a large impact. And then some of the other categories on the development services side also, not at that level by any means, but do have a significant impact.
Yeah, our sales tax revenue runs in the $600,000 to $700,000 per month. So I don't know off the top of my head what fourth quarter was like last year, but as Mike mentioned, is if you want to see an 80% reduction, you're probably looking at around 1.5 million. So, like he mentioned, we've received 6 months of revenue so far this fiscal year, and we still have budgeted a little over $4 million of sales tax to be received.
Okay, I'm going to go from side to side. I'll go to Mr. Matthews. Nothing? Okay, Mr. Vance?
Processing what you just said. Steve, how much sales tax revenue so far this year? You said roughly?
Through revenue, 6 months basically through December, because we're 3 months behind.
How many millions you said it was? You said we were expecting budgeted to receive another $4 million this year. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Through the June 30th.
Right.
That's what that's what was budgeted.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And when Mr. Frank says sales tax is 3 months behind, it's just a 3-month lag because it's distributed quarterly.
It's the processing, it's not,
Clarification.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong,
Right.
it's just the way it always
Well,
is.
it's always been, actually, you get it the fourth month, actually, it's 3 months, and then you get it the next month, so it's almost 4 months, so. Okay. So we're looking at, potential, as Mr. Dellinger's projected 80% of $4 million, or a good chunk of change. Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Is that it for you, Mr.
will-
Behringer?
Oh.
Okay, none for here. Did you want to make clarification?
Oh, no,
Mr.
I was going to
Manager?
say we can certainly run Mr. Dellinger's, Councilmember Dellinger's model, but we'll also see if there's any other. We commonly get some projections, maybe in times like this, we might get something from the league about what they anticipate, so we might be running several models, but that's one we can look at.
That'd be helpful going into the budget.
Okay, so let's see, this doesn't require any specific action. This is for our information and
Sir?
alerting us to what's to come, sort of. Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Okay, next item of business, Census 2020 update, and Mr. Banford and/or Mr. Mercer, or is it Mr. Banford?
It'd be a combination of both.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. We're here tonight to give you an update on the 2020 census. And we have a short presentation for you, and we'll just go over some census facts. The census is a count of everybody residing in all 50 states. It is required by the United States Constitution every 10 years. The census responses are confidential and protected. Individual questionnaires are not public record. The data that is gathered from census questionnaires are organized into data tables and spreadsheets and data, and those are organized into several geographic boundaries. You have data on the United States, you have data on individual states, you have population data on counties, population data on cities and towns, and also at lower level boundaries called census tracts and block groups. And to give you an idea of the size of a block group, which is the lowest level boundary, those would include several neighborhoods. Some more census facts. Between March 12th and March 20th, invitations to respond to the census will be sent out in the mail. I am aware that some people are beginning to receive those now. Those invitations will be in several languages, inviting people to respond to the census online or by phone. Households that have not responded will receive an additional reminder, and then if they have still not responded, a paper hard copy questionnaire will be sent to them in the mail, and those will be around mid-April. If people do not respond to the paper questionnaire, then census takers will go door to door to collect those responses in person. Why is the census important? Population counts determine how much money a community will get from both the state and federal government. The state redistributes sales tax revenues back to communities based on their population size. States also provide economic development incentives based on census data. The federal government redistributes tax dollars back to communities in the form of grants. Population counts are also used to determine congressional representation in the U.S. House of Representatives. And this map just shows that over time, those district boundaries will change, and that's because of population counts. Census data is also used for school district assignment, for developing senior lunch programs, for locating child daycare centers, and to help businesses identify where to locate. Regarding school district assignments, this is a map from the Wake County Public School website. This is the attendance zone, also called a school district, for East Garner Middle School. So census population information is used to determine where kids will go to school. Getting an accurate census count is important so that Garner will receive our fair share of all these benefits. In 2010, Wake County had a response rate goal of 80%. Initially, Garner's response rate was 71.8%. Those were the questionnaires that people responded to. And then after the census takers went out door to door, that response rate went up from 71.8 to 78%. Wake County's overall response rate was 78%. And the goal for Census 2020 is 82% response rate. So I'm going to go over a couple programs that town staff has participated in over the last year. The first one is called LUCA, Local Update of Census Addresses. And the census sent us addresses to review, and we submitted 1,536 address corrections and updates back to the census. We also participated in the new construction program last October, and we provided the census with 1,647 residential addresses for which construction was in progress during or after March 1st, 2018, and completion was expected by Census Day, April 1st. So we went through all the, a lot of the new construction that's going on, the subdivisions around town, and we looked at lots that were under construction and also some vacant lots that were vacant back in March of 2018 and sent the census those addresses. We also participated in the boundary validation program this February. The census sent us a boundary map of what they showed for the town's corporate limits, the annexed area. And their information was outdated, and we participated in this program to send them all the updated annexation information so they have an accurate boundary of our town limits. We also participated, that the boundary and annexation survey was that program to update the town limits with the census. We also, our staff has participated with Wake County's Complete Count Committee. We have partnered with Wake County and have been working with them since May of 2019. We have attended monthly meetings to plan and discuss ways to ensure an accurate count and to look at areas that were undercounted or had low response rate from the last census. We've also received some advertisement materials which we have passed out. We have some of those in the lobby now. The town did participate in a census booth, I believe last year at the July 3rd fireworks celebration at Lake Benson Park. Garner Communications has also assisted with some outreach efforts on the town's website and social media. And they also have prepared a census video as well. Wake County has sent out some census postcards to everyone in several low response areas from the 2010 census. So block groups and census tracts that had a response rate of 25% or less, they sent out a census postcard to them. And the map on the left shows all the areas in Wake County that were targeted, and the map on the right shows the areas in Garner that were sent these postcards that had a low response rate. And this would be areas kind of along the Benson Road corridor on the east and west side, and also west of White Oak Road. This information was sent to us, I believe, yesterday. With the impacts of the virus, the census will be adjusting some operations. Number one, they will adjust some operations to make sure college students are counted, because many of them are on spring break and have been told not to come back. Working with group quarters administrators to ensure they count their residents. A group quarters is like a rest home. working with service providers to determine the best way forward. This is with emergency and transitional shelters. They will also delay the start of the mobile questionnaire assistance program. I believe last time they had a mobile trailer truck that drove around, I believe parked at White Oak Shopping Center, if I believe, and it was for people to go and have their census filled out. Lastly, they are delaying the early non-response follow-up operation. Moving to milestones, this month, people will start to receive the postcards and information on the census. April 1st is designated as Census Day. Through June and July, if people have not responded to the census, census takers will go door to door to make sure everybody is counted. December 31st, the census information will be presented to the President of the United States. And in 2021, next year, the census data will become available to the public. So we won't receive any census data until next year. And I'll go over, this is my last slide. In closing, the 2020 census is underway right now. Mailings of census forms began last week and are continuing. And the mailings are scheduled in cycles, and that's what the chart below shows. You can complete the 2020 census online, over the phone, or by paper form. So if you do not respond to the to the postcards that invite you to do it online or over the phone, you will receive a paper questionnaire in mid-April. Please complete your 2020 census questionnaire, but also be advised that you may still receive some reminders from the census. So people will receive about 3 postcards, and then a questionnaire will be sent out if they have not responded. And then I believe there will be a 5th mailing. So it'll be a total of 5 different notices that could potentially be sent out. And I will be happy to answer any questions, and Rick would like to have some information as well to provide.
Okay, should we have his presentation, then we can have questions for either of you? Would that be
Sure,
okay,
that'd
Rick?
be fine.
So, yes, good evening, council.
Good evening.
We have, I did bring a prop, so perhaps have seen a few of these, or you will start to see more of these along roadsides, outside town facilities. We were able to put one out at Creech Road Elementary today, which is important because that's a food distribution site for families during the school closing. So that's a good way to reach families. We had hoped to have a pop-up town hall with the mayor featuring or putting a special emphasis on the census, but we did have to cancel that. And so as part of our other outreach that doesn't involve people to people, face-to-face meetings, of course, we've been doing social media over the course of about the past 6 to 8 weeks. We've been on Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor quite a bit, sharing stuff from the Census Bureau directly. Also, Wake County's been generating content, and they've generated graphics. Actually, this graphic here you'll see repeated in social media and in the video that, in the video that I'm about to show. And that's one of the big pieces of social media content that we'll be pushing out and putting on our website and sending out an e-blast, all of our various ways. Adam has put together a video. Mostly, it's a short PSA. Mostly it touches on many of the talking points that the Census Bureau has already been pushing out. But we tried to localize it, 1, by having people from our community in the video, 2, by having some information that is specific to Garner that demonstrates the importance of the the census for our community. So I'm going to cue this. It is queued up. Let me see if I can get it rolling for you. Let's.
Hello, I'm Mayor Ken Marshburn. Hello, I'm Mayor Ken Marshburn. Time surely does fly. You turn around and another decade has just come and gone. And now that it's 2020, Garner needs to be counted in the census.
Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in our country. It's required by the Constitution.
So why is the census important? Well, it helps to determine how federal funding is distributed to police and fire departments,
to schools and senior centers,
and to road and sidewalk projects.
In Garner, census data has been used in recent years for a planned roundabout project at White Oak, Ackerman, and Hebron Church Roads.
Construction of the new Garner Recreation Center.
And bulletproof vests and body-worn cameras for police.
Census data is also used to decide how many seats we get in Congress.
And to determine how lines are drawn for congressional districts, state legislative districts, and school districts.
And consider this, Garner loses approximately $1,600 in federal funding for each person who is not counted.
This month, you'll be receiving an invite to complete the Easy Census Questionnaire. You can fill it out online, by phone, or you can mail it in. If you don't respond, a census taker will follow up to assist you.
The personal information you share is kept safe. By law, it cannot be shared with other government agencies, law enforcement, or landlords.
So make sure you participate in the census so Garner can be counted.
Facebook to make sure it reaches a lot of people. And I think that's about it. It is important maybe to reiterate or to tell the public that the mailings you'll be getting, the questionnaires, everything, those mailings will be coming directly from the Census Bureau. Those are not town mailings. So, thanks.
Just before we go to questions, number one, let's say it only took about 10 or 12 takes for me to get my lines right, I believe, but at any rate, thank you very much. And I suspect most of you here have received an envelope that looks like this. I received mine, and I can tell you, because there's only 2 in my household, but if you go online, it takes no more than 10 minutes, unless you have a wife that asks lots of questions about it. But at any rate, you really can do it very quickly. And I don't know of any reason why the town of Garner cannot get its percentage of responses up into a more respectable range. And obviously the importance is that we count everybody. And so I urge you, when you see an envelope like this, take it out and send it back. Excuse me. Actually, the survey is not in the first one. It just gives you instructions about it, right? But I want to thank Rick and David for the good work they've done and for really getting the word out. So at this point, I'll turn it over to questions. Phil, you have any?
And that was per person, we lose 1,600, what's that figure again?
Pretty phenomenal.
That is an estimate that I think Wake County generated that, and some town, I think Apex figured out a formula for it. And it varies a little bit town to town, but 1,600 is a pretty solid number. We didn't exactly crunch all the numbers for Garner, but yeah, I mean, if we're undercounted, that's money that ultimately we lose for our community for a number of things, as we saw in the video.
Okay, great.
If we were 78% last year, say 80% of 35,000, that's 7,000 people, it's $1,600. A lot of money. Yep. Thanks for the information. Good video, even if it did take the mayor, Rick told me it took you 14 takes.
Oh, excuse me, I didn't count that, man. Okay. Ms. Behringer. Mr. Vance?
Good presentation.
Mr. Dellinger?
Love the video.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Keep up the promotion, and I certainly will do that as I can and have opportunities out there in the community. And I encourage our council members to do it as well. I'm sure you will. Thank you. Anything you need further from us at this point?
No, sir. It was just an update.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Speaking of updates, we will now hear from Mr. Bridges. Sam has a presentation for us. I believe there's something at your desk. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. I'll see if I can pull this up.
I'll maximize it.
Go to
Y'all know.
slideshow. Can you, someone help? Yeah.
Okay. Page down button, right.
And then hit the escape button.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So tonight, wanted to talk about these things and whatever else y'all might have questions about.
And you have these slides in front of you in black and white?
Yes, everybody should have one.
So as you probably know, our representative in the House is Rosa Gill. Y'all know who taught at Garner High School and was served on the Wake County School Board. And she, and that has not changed much, or that has not changed since the last cycle. What has changed is in the Senate, now Senator Blue is our representative in Garner. It was Senator Jay Chowdhury. So, but Senator Blue now has the majority of the Garner districts. Representative Julie Von Hafen and Senator Sam Searcy have some of the southern precincts like Eagle Ridge and Rand Road. And y'all know Matt Calabria. Just spoke to him yesterday. He is running unopposed, has already filed, and their cycle is underway. And I'm sure many of you have know Monica and have met Monica. She's been on our District 2 representative for a while now. And I don't know if she's running again, but that filing will take place this summer. In regard to the Wake County Commissioners, you may remember I just mentioned to you a while back in November about their comprehensive plan and that they were going to focus on the future I-540 and US 401 intersection, which is expected to be a dense area. And mentioned to you back in August about the hospitality tax. And we had a discussion about that, and y'all invited Denise from the county to come talk about that. The county commissioners voted yesterday to allow the county manager to spend an additional $2 million to respond to the health crisis. And in discussions with Matt, he told me, we talked some about the virus response. And y'all seen a lot of that in the news, of course. He said that the Public Health Department, while they have submitted a lot of samples for testing, that they are monitoring at least 380 people in Wake County who may or may not have it. So they're tracking and tracing and visiting and calling and keeping up with folks who may suffer from it. In regard to the Wake County School Board, their assignment plan was, less complicated than usual. They only opened one new school, and those are the schools around at Banks Road Elementary, Fuquay, Varina Elementary, and Willow Springs Elementary would be impacted. And what they are trying to do now is figure out how to go back and deal with balancing the school populations. And if I've been to 2 or 3 of the work sessions where they've been discussing this, and I think you would be impressed at the depth of the discussions. They're really trying to deal with it in a multi-pronged way. And Bill Fletcher reminded the board when they started the discussion last week that, we think we have gotten a lot of benefit, economic and community benefits from the 1975 merger, and which merged the Raleigh City and Wake County schools. So what they're doing is, instead of just using transportation, busing, and magnet schools to do the balancing. They're trying to do some marketing, trying to look hard at what's going on with the magnet schools, trying to increase access to courses like AP courses that may not be offered as many places as they should be, and try to strengthen the academic programs at all schools. But anyway, they're in the midst of talking about all that. At the work session last week, they discussed how to strengthen magnet schools. But it's a complicated discussion. You know, part of the discussion is about, you know, Broughton, for instance, was an IB magnet at one point. They took it away and they gave it back. So their free and reduced lunch population is not near what it is at Enloe, for instance. And just, you know, they talking about what needs to be done. And anyway, I don't know if they're going to, I mean, it's a complicated subject, as you know. There are no easy answers, but they are trying to deal with this with a multi-pronged strategy. Can I ask you a question there? Sure.
Yeah, you said we could interrupt if you want to.
So if I understood you correctly, if the F&R ratio can take a IP status away from the school, IB? Well, there are lots of different thoughts about that, and ways of dealing with magnet schools. Garner, for instance, our free and reduced population is about, I think, 35%. I have a graphic up here I can show you if you can help me get to it, Rodney. If I can close this out and go to it. So one of the factors they're considering is when they import a magnet, how to explain that, but when you draw students into a magnet school that are not part of the base, you know, what makes up that population? Does it help reduce the free and reduced population much, or does it not? So I have yeah, that's it. So the F&R is based upon, I'm trying to get updated here. Sure. That's based upon the base of the school, not those that they bring in?
Yeah, so look at this table. So for Smith, this is Smith Elementary, which I highlighted in yellow.
And these are just magnet schools.
Yeah, so free and reduced population is 68%. The magnet students that come in still have a high, I mean, it's 59%. So it doesn't reduce the overall population. That's the third column. So we go down to East Garner. The second column is the base free and reduced lunch population at 62%. The folks who are coming in, drawn by the magnet status, is at 41%. And so it doesn't reduce it much, but it reduces it 2%. At the high school, at Garner High School, which is, of course, South Garner is not a magnet, the free and reduced population is 36%. The population coming in is significantly lower, but it's a small subset of the overall student population, so it only reduces the overall
population by 1%. Now look at Enloe. It's way different. Enloe has a 62% base to start with. They draw a lot of higher income kids such that their population coming in is only 6%, and it dramatically reduces the overall number. You see that? And look at Broughton. You know, they start out at 23. They have a lot of high income students coming in, and it doesn't reduce it that much because, you know, it doesn't have that far to go. So those are the kind of things that they're looking at to try to see what's working. At Enloe, that, you know, was, I guess, the first magnet school, and it works. And that's in part because I think it's been there a long time, and it's developed a tradition of being a strong magnet school. In Garner, I can give you a little bit of anecdotal information about the magnet school or the magnet program. My kids went there. Both of them were in the IB magnet. There, I would guess, maybe 100 students, juniors and seniors, Gray, in the magnet program, which is not a big slice of the school. There are other kids taking AP courses, others on the college track, but it's a fairly small population of the school. However, from my perspective, did you know that we have 2 Garner students on the Princeton football team? I mean, Ivy League Princeton, not Johnston County Princeton. In Caroline's class, my daughter's class, she graduated in 2018. The valedictorian went to Harvard. She started out at Creech Road. I mean, that's amazing. She's Arab American. And in Eli's class, I think, in Eli's class, Colin Eady, who he grew up with playing football, is playing for Princeton. He was not in the magnet program, but he's one of the leading rushers in the Ivy League now. And so that is a tradition that is getting stronger. In Eli's class, not only Colin went to the Ivy League, but there was another young woman out of the magnet program that went to Columbia. So anyway, that is the anecdotal information that I think has been good for Garner. So we can look at these numbers, the school board can try to think about what to do, but Enloe, you know, like Broughton, and now Garner to some extent, and I'm sure other schools too, I think what draws students to the magnet programs is, can I get into a good college from here? So the answer is yes, you can. You know, not everybody's going to get there, but anyway, that's one of the things. In the East, and Wendell and Zebulon, the magnet schools are there in part to keep those students there. And so they won't go somewhere else. So to keep them in a school with a population that has a high FNR number, and the magnet programs are designed to try to keep them there. Because, you know, not many folks are going to travel all the way to the east. So that is some of the discussion. So now how would I get back to other stuff?
Rick was gonna help, yeah.
Sam, you mentioned that, was it Broughton or Enlow? Well, I think it was Broughton where they had the magnet program, then at some point they eliminated that and then they,
Right.
yeah, okay. As far as we know, the Garner Magnet High School is subject to remain that under any current or future
Yes,
consideration. Is that
no
right?
plans to take that away. Does that
No
include
plans.
the new school out there?
The new school?
Yeah, the new senior high.
Yeah, no plans to make it a magnet.
There's no plans, okay.
No plans to make that a magnet. The school board is considering expanding the magnet program to some other schools, and that was a discussion in, I think, February or January, and the board is hesitant because they want to look at the big picture and make sure the magnet schools that we already have are doing well.
They're an interesting group to work with. I remember from my county commissioner days. It was,
Right. If I make
Anybody else have questions? This
yeah,
will be-
well, I got a couple other slides for you.
Okay.
I have one quick question,
But
comment
yes.
on, what would be helpful in the spreadsheet that you provided is the percentage of the students that are coming in as magnet versus the ones that are already there.
Right.
Instead of us having to kind of intuit based on the total population of the school and then the change over time, because I think one field had sort of been copied over, but it's hard to see the percentage of actual students that actually came in. We had the percentage that were free and reduced lunch, but not the total number. So it's hard to figure out what percentage of the school is getting, being made up by those magnet students. So it'd be helpful to see the proportion change.
right, yeah, if they would, yeah, they could add a column to say how many magnet students are there.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, they should add a column and tell you whatever percentage, I mean, it should be the actual number should be beside each column, should be 3 more columns. Because some of them had little or no effect. That's because there's not that many students.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Right.
really easy. You got, I don't know, the high school 1,000, the base, and you're bringing in 300 or 100 or 200. I mean, the actual number is very small. That's why it's not changing. That's why Broughton's not changing.
Right.
The ones they're bringing in is a very small number. In low, obviously, it's got to be a tremendous change to go from 63% to 23% or whatever.
Yeah.
So it has to show the actual number of students. So that's, I mean, I'm not trying to say they're trying to hide what they're showing, but show the numbers. Percentages, I mean,
Yeah.
2% of nothing is not, 10% of nothing is nothing. You know, your profit increase, you show 50%. Well, how much did your profit increase? Well, it's flat, so it increased 0. I mean, that's plain numbers. They should show the numbers. And along with the percentages, then you can actually see it, so.
Yeah,
That's not you, you're just bringing.
I know, the number might be very high or it might be very low.
Maybe not, it's just, go here, we go to slides, I have another question for you after that.
And can we get a copy of that?
Sure.
slide? That would be great.
Absolutely.
It's good information. It's been a long time since I've
I
seen
need to
some.
get some of your new emails too, so,
can get it
and
to
also,
you. It'll be
please,
sent to him.
please call me anytime. We're not going to court for a while. We're not going anywhere. So I look forward to talking to you and telling you more about all this stuff, so.
Before we go to the General Assembly, anybody have a question for him in regards to the school information? Okay, everybody's good with that? All right, proceed, please, sir.
So General Assembly, planning to return on April 28th. Of course, that may change sooner or later. As you know, last year, they did not pass a budget. But good news about that is that gives us a little bit of a surplus going into, the nightmare. So talk about how much that is in a little bit later. Mr. Hodges asked me to monitor this on behalf of the Planning Department. The Select Committee on Residential Planning and Permitting, be headed by Representative Mark Brody, had planned to meet next week. That's canceled. Everything's canceled. But we'll keep up with that when they start back. This was one of our legislative agenda items, the billboard bill. The league reached a compromise with the Outdoor Advertising Association, and then the bill was ultimately vetoed.
This is a long and complicated planning bill that the league worked on with the Bar Association and the home builders that was passed and signed by the governor. And the historic preservation tax credits got extended through 2024. So talked to the lady at Fiscal Research, and this was also in the news too. The rainy day fund, the fund that's set aside is $1.17 billion. The Fiscal Research and the Office of State Budget and Management say it should be more. But that's just what's set aside in that fund. But she said that there are potentially $2.2 billion available going into the short session. And I don't know if that means what's already been collected or what's projected to be collected through June. But that's what she said. And then, of course, she said, but that was before what's coming.
Wasn't there, maybe a couple of years ago, $2 billion in that rainy day fund? Didn't they hit the $2 billion mark a few years ago?
They may have. They may have.
Where did that go?
I don't know.
I know you don't know.
But they didn't pass a budget. And because they didn't pass a budget, that's part of why we have this $2.2 billion. But like y'all, next year is going to be, yeah, I expect at least $2.2 billion down. So, you know, you know, she didn't really want to talk about it. Their forecasters did not want to give me any information because nobody knows what's coming. But that was the best she could give me. However, the good news is we have $4 billion in this unemployment insurance trust fund. Got a feeling that might be used for something else too coming. So she said it was one of the largest in the country, very well funded. That may be in part because our term is shorter or something, but there's a lot of money in that fund coming into this crisis. The league had planned to meet with us. Mr. Baggett is also a lobbyist. I get to see him sometimes. And we usually meet with the league 2 or 3 times a year. We'd plan to do that next week, but of course that's canceled too. So that's what I have for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, any other questions for Mr. Bridges?
But yeah, if you want to delve into something, the school board or whatever, please call me and I'll email you some. I have some other documents, PDF files that I collect, presentations made at the school board, presentations made at the county commission, legislative maps, the new maps. I can send you a bunch of stuff to look at and we can talk about it.
And Sam, I'm sure, as town manager said, if you need email addresses, he can certainly provide those to any of the council members if you don't have them all. Okay.
All right, thank y'all very much.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
I was reading one of these blocks. You showed us Wake County School Board goals for long-term success, purpose to ensure balanced and integrated schools and reduce socioeconomic balance. Included several strategies: increase access, add and enhance academic programs, marketing, strengthen magnet and year-round schools, and employ transportation strategies. It's interesting that nowhere in there, when I know that you didn't write this, so I'm not getting on you. It never says anywhere that we want to work on an environment that creates better learning. It's particularly focused on the students where, based on test scores, the F&R students usually may not have as high test scores and create more challenges for the teachers and administrators, but we're going to strengthen the magnet and year-round schools. That's a strange long-term policy to ensure balanced and integrated schools and reduce socioeconomic balance. But we're in there is to help create the learning environment that helps the the families who are challenged, and the kids who are challenged, and the kids who struggle and struggle because they may not have meals or a place to live. That's just an interesting long-term strategy, not to have anywhere in there really strengthen, add and enhance academic programs. I reckon that's covering their butt on that, but it's just a weird to read that and not say, we're gonna really try to help the socioeconomic imbalance. It shows that, but what are you gonna do to help the ones at the bottom? It's like to me, you're trying to help the ones at the top.
Well,
It's strengthen magnet year-round schools. I'm just saying, I don't see a very clear statement in there where we're looking to help the teachers and the administrators with the challenges they face with kids who may not score as high or do as well in learning. I don't see that anywhere.
Well, I'm just giving you one out of many slides. I'll send you the rest of them. And this is a but what they would say, I think, in response to that, this is a subset goal of the overall goal of 95% graduation. So.
Well, many years ago, they had a goal of decreasing F&R from never any school would have above 40, then we're gonna try to get to 35, and then that never worked. So.
What they'd also tell you is that over the last 10 years, they have not done as much transporting. And over the last 10 years, these numbers are getting out of balance again. So they've got to go back and figure out, what they're going to do about it. And they're trying to do it without, as I think, and this is paraphrased, of course, trying to do it by considering some other strategies.
A lot of that is charter schools. A lot of the growth has been absorbed by charters, and so that starts to disbalance the numbers. Even though your programmatic elements haven't changed, your demographics are changing as the county grows. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I've got a copy of something you sent, via email. Yeah, so thank you for continuing to keep us informed, Sam. Okay, at this point, we've been going for almost 2 hours, and it's almost 9 o'clock, so I'm going to call about a 10-minute recess, and we will come back and finish our agenda at that time. So we stand in recess for 10 minutes. Okay, we're back in session, and we're now at the last item under new and old business, and that was at a request to remove this item from the consent agenda and to bring it before the council for some discussion. Budget amendment space needs study, and Mr. Dellinger, who requested that we do that, I'm going to ask him to give us more information about what your inquiry is, Mr. Dellinger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wanted to pull it out of consent agenda is it's a kind of a time-sensitive project that we had previously approved, and I wanted to get kind of some insight on what impact the virus situation would have on their ability to do the work, and just if Matt could speak to that, that would be, I think, helpful in us figuring out where it fits in.
Sure. Yeah. Just as a reminder, the action that you all took previously was to approve the contract and our ability to enter into that contract. And the way that we were going to pay for that was to take money from fund balance. And so this is the follow-up piece that that puts the money in place, essentially. So this was the other part of that. I have had some conversation with the IBI group, which is the consultant that we had chosen through the selection process, and they are ready to continue with the work. Of course, things are a little bit different, so that we have had some questions about, both from their perspective and from ours. Typically they would come and, they would have a kickoff meeting with staff. They would tour the facility, assess the facility as they're doing that. They would have a lot of sit-down meetings with our existing staff about, how they use the space and what kind of needs they might have in the future. And so, that most of that, not walking around the campus and checking out the buildings, but a lot of that can be done virtually. Probably not as effective. I mean, you know, it's harder to have as good a rapport and a conversation sometimes, but it can be done virtually. So they, I think they're ready to move forward. They just wanted some guidance from us about whether, you know, how we would choose to handle it. Have we put in place any policies or procedures that would change the way that they are supposed to be interacting with our staff and that kind of thing. So I think in practice it might make it a little bit more challenging and take perhaps a little bit longer to do it, and we are under a tight time frame if we want to stick to the original schedule. So I think we would need to either allow that we may have to extend that schedule by a little bit. But it's just difficult to say because this is evolving so quickly. But I think it's likely there would be some schedule impact.
Is the language in the contract, is it flexible enough to accommodate that? I'm sure both parties agree to some changes, but are there provisions in there, anything explicit around it, or would we just have to come to a sort of meeting of the minds as the changes occur?
I think because of where we are in the process, we could modify it to push the end date out or come to some other sort of agreement about how we might phrase the termination period of a contract. So I think we can accommodate that. So yeah, I mean, I think if the question is can we find a reasonable way to move forward, I think the answer is yes. If there's anything about our financial picture, you know, the discussion that you heard earlier about, you know, sales tax revenues and that kind of thing, you know, I think this, along with many other projects, are things that we could potentially decide that it was in our best interest to not move forward with. So that's a whole separate question. If that's something that you all might be interested in, then we can have that discussion. But in terms of, you know, can we move forward with it? You know, can the work be done, and can we work the contract out to accommodate this? I think the answer is yes, and it would probably be beneficial to at least, if you all are open to the idea, to move forward with it at least to a degree so that we have the option to continue the work. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to spend the money or fully spend the money if we decide that we want to pause or slow down for other budgetary reasons.
Okay, any other council members have questions? Yeah.
I just got a comment. Obviously, this is something that needs to be done, and with the growth we're going through right now, Mr. Mayor and our fellow council members, I don't think we need to slow this down. Again, it's a term I use, let's think outside of the envelope. And so I would encourage everybody to support, let's moving forward on this, and let's get this job done, and let's do it right. And let's do it right the first time, to your satisfaction and the town managers. And then we can sit back and do what we need to do. But I believe we just need to move forward, and let's make it happen now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matthews. Any other council member wish to comment or ask a question?
No, I agree with Mr. Matthews. I think we need to move forward, and I'll put that in the form of a motion that we approve ordinance 2020-4049 to proceed with the space needs study. And all of us are aware of the fact of any issues with time constraints, meeting deadlines may be compromised, but I think we all realize that.
I'll second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Then since others maybe didn't have a chance to weigh in, I'll pause for any other discussions or concerns.
I'm supportive of it. I just wanted to make sure we had the flexibility. I think we need it long-term. It's something we need, so.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes. Do you have any idea how much this is going to change the schedule?
No, I mean, just being honest, it's so difficult to predict what's going to happen over the next, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I think, assuming that we move forward with it, I think we would sooner decide to go ahead and find ways to do this virtually rather than have the schedule slow down entirely to wait until this is over. So I think we would just go with a slightly less optimal way of having these meetings, and in order to keep it moving forward. So. But in terms of it, I don't know, maybe an extra month. I mean, it's very difficult to say because there's just so much uncertainty right now. But I don't think we would,
unless we are making a budgetary decision to not move forward, I don't think we would intend to, have a extensive delay in the project. I mean, I think we would sooner just find remote way, other ways of having these meetings so that they can move forward.
Okay, your question answered, okay. So we have a motion and a second that we adopt ordinance 202, was that it, Mr. Single, 4049, is that right?
Yes, sir, 2020-4049.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote. So all of those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Okay, thank you, Mr. Roy Lance. All right, the next item on our agenda is committee reports and the attorney recommendation. The mayor would like to inform you of the progress we've made in regards to considering how we want to move ahead with attorney representation. Hopefully all of you received either via email or maybe it's your desk, did you say, a copy of a memorandum regarding this matter, preliminary discussion on provisions of town legal service. Did everybody receive that? Okay. So the idea tonight is to just inform you that the subcommittee we put together, which is essentially Mayor Pro Tem Behringer and myself, and we had several meetings with the town manager and his staff, or Mr. Roy Lance, I guess. And I won't seek to review everything on here, but we had several meetings and discussions, including a good discussion with our current interim attorney, Mr. Baggett. And after going through this process and considering a goodly number of items, we believe and would recommend that the council agree with our recommendation that the town pursue an in-house attorney or a full-time attorney, however you want to refer to that. Obviously, we're not ready to move on the specifics of that this evening, but we mainly wanted to have the council weigh in on this recommendation to make sure that there is either consensus or a strong desire to move this way. And then obviously we will come back to you with the processes and the logistics of how we will move ahead with this. So if you have questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to. And Mr. Roy Lance there has even some other information if we need that. What say you, or comments, questions?
I have a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Okay. It kind of goes back to the previous issue we were dealing with, and I think we're all in agreement that our town is growing by leaps and bounds, and no longer we're a small town anymore. Just the short period of time, I know myself being set on this board, some of the things, the millions of dollars of businesses moving in and things of that nature, and issues that the town staff has to deal with. I think having an attorney, having a resident here full-time will be a great asset to us, not only to the board members when we've got questions, of course to the staff and the town manager, as well as all the staff. And that attorney would most certainly be sort of somewhat, would be the only client, which is a wonderful thing, and would be very much well-versed in all the projects that we're dealing on and the ups and downs of it. And so they could really honestly take ownership of the issues as far as a legal aspect would be concerned. And I totally agree. I think having a full-time attorney, we're at that point now in our growth, and I think it'd be a great idea, and I would encourage my colleagues to favorably look at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Singleton, anything you want to add?
I don't disagree with that. We've talked about this quite a while, off and on for the last year or so. I will remind everyone that if we so choose to do that, our budget item for attorney and the attorney budget will increase dramatically. People just need to realize that. Based on what other communities pay and have paid for legal services, that budget line will increase a lot.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Keep that in mind.
Questions, comments this way, Ms. Behringer, Mr. Vance?
I'm inclined to agree with my colleague. Phil Matthews in reference to is imperative to have individual in-house who's right there able to understand all the aspects and on the ready to provide the answers to the staff they need to move forward on issues that require the legal assistance quickly, and also to coordinate for other areas with other attorneys where we need them. So they're with you.
Thank you, sir. Mr.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you. So there is consensus. I don't think we need a formal vote on that. And we will get back together and be prepared to bring information back before this council in terms of the process for hiring an attorney and other elements of how that new attorney will operate. Obviously, the previous attorney answered to the council, and we would anticipate that still be the case, but this will be a person that will work closely, we think, with the town manager. So if it's okay with council, we will take this and move in the direction we thought we'd like to go in and come back before you with something as soon as possible. Take so long. We've got to, and we'll confer some more with Mr. Baggett as we move forward. Anything you want to add to that, sir?
No, I think it's a wise decision. I've been an in-house city attorney for 20 years, and 9 years later, they still call me about things that happen.
They want you on camera, I believe, for my response. I'm sorry.
Well, it's just tremendous help to the town generally, to the council, to the staff also, to have someone with a depth of knowledge of the people in town, not just in the town government, but in town, the history of what you've dealt with, where you want to go. It's just and someone at hand for the staff to consult with on a regular basis. It will be more expensive, but I think you'll get value if you're lucky enough to get the right person. It's hard to do in a situation where you send out an ad and interview people, but yeah, I think it's the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your good comments. Okay, with that, we will proceed then. Mr. Roy Lance, anything else you wanted to? Okay. Thank you very much. All right. We'll move to the next item. That is our manager's report. So, Mr. Town Manager, you're up.
All right, you have the Garner info in your packet there. We're down to one page on that. We still have the one outstanding item that's we're waiting to get installed, the replacement of the playground apparatus. So hopefully we can get that soon. We should be getting a schedule on when that might happen over the next couple of days. I have a building and permit report in there, and then Mr. Hodges is going to give you an update on some of the initiatives we've taken here lately pertaining to traffic calming.
So, Mayor, members of council, there was a request for us to provide an update tonight, and we're trying to be as flexible with staff and some of their needs during this scheduling time, so I'm delivering this brief update on Mr. Johnson's behalf. There was a question about some of the testing devices that have been observed, I think, on Sycamore Street, and we also have some out in the Eagle Ridge subdivision. Since we have been talking about this for the last couple of months, staff has been going out and resurveying some of the areas that had been previously requested by citizens. We have got some data that was coming in with getting different results, and so we're working on with our equipment now. We've replaced one of the tube counters. Some of you may be familiar with these little black strips that go across the road as one of the devices we're using. And we're trying to make sure that we don't have any equipment issues that are causing some of the variations with those tests. We also have a situation specifically on Sycamore Street where we want to make sure that we are doing the retesting when there is regular school traffic, because we believe that because of its location, there's likely some traffic generated because of the school, and so we want to make sure that there's school traffic is in. So we will, no matter what we do with this issue between now and the time school's back in regular session, we would want to go back out and do some recounts when schools are back in. And then once Mr. Johnson feels like that he's got a good handle on the devices that we're using and the data that we've resurveyed, we had originally planned to take this item and bring recommendations and some data back to the Public Works Committee, which is what we would often do with a topic like this, and then let the Public Works Committee bring a recommendation back to council. So we don't have a lot of details to report tonight other than we've identified some issues, and we would just like to be reaffirm that if it's okay with council, we'll bring the recommendations and the revised data to Public Works Committee when we're able to schedule that, and work with the committee on that.
Okay, questions for Mr. Hodges?
Yeah, I have to comment on the Sycamore one. I get an earful on that one quite a bit, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the feedback I get on that is the location of the device is near a place on the street where there's almost always a car parked on one side, and it's also right at the park entrance. So it's not at the highest velocity part of the road, and so there's, again, I get continuous concern that that's one of the issues. I don't know if that's something that can be moved to a different part of the road, and then see how it compares with the data you already have to see if maybe there is that difference that is anecdotal. Full disclosure, that's my road. I don't want, Mr. Vance is laughing, but, so I don't want to make it look like I'm worried about my road, but that's where the device is, so.
Okay. Once we can figure out the best locations for that, is it okay with council, though, that we do bring back, the next step would be coming back to Public Works Committee with the information and take it to the committee as we would typically do with these type matters?
I certainly think that's the best course of action. That's what we would normally do, and they get to sort of vet the process there and then bring it back to a recommendation of full council. Okay?
Fine.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Okay, Mr. Manager, you still have a couple of other items?
Yeah, I guess the next thing we need to do is have a discussion about the planned March 31st and April 1st meeting. March 31st is a regular work session time, and we were gonna pretty much amend that and probably make it a little longer and kind of roll it into maybe a day or day and a half or 2-day retreat. I know one of the items we did take care of tonight, so we're just trying to engage council's appetite to maybe continue that in light of maybe some of the things going on. And then April 1st, where we were gonna have a potential to have a facilitator, you know, that still could be in question with the School of Government. They may have some travel restrictions and cause us not to be able to use that person, so that would change. Now, we still plan to have our financial advisors, Davenport and Company, and they have informed us that they are still available. However, if you know, there may be an opportunity to maybe have them on the 31st instead of waiting till the 1st. So this may be some discussion on, you know, if council still wants to try to continue on with that, and then we'll get some input and schedule it accordingly. And then
Okay, so if I'm
Matt, I
gonna,
know Matt and Mike and others and John have helped with the scheduling of it, so if you have any questions about the schedule or anything in particular, I think there's one item that may come off related to transit that we were gonna try to have, but we can talk about that too.
What time are you thinking about starting on the 31st?
The plan was to start at 4, but if we end up trying to move Davenport to just that one day, we may have to start sooner, because that presentation could take a little bit longer. But so there's a few different variables, but we think we can work it out depending on what council desire is.
I think that Davenport's really important, especially with this year and the coming years with what all's going on. And if we can make that a really good priority to have them down here, it'd be a great time. Plus, it'll help us with our planning and where we want to go to from here, because we need to see what we got and let them show us the big Ouija board, I call it, where things are moving around constantly. And but Mr. Mayor, I think if we could have Davenport, part of that would be good, most important.
so am I understanding sort of that the options you're asking us to consider is to potentially continue the 31st session and maybe start it a little earlier, but consider whether or not the April 1st session could go forward?
Yeah, depending on what happens with April 1st and what we find out with that, we may try to condense everything maybe into the 31st potential.
Which will be, don't think
Kind of accurate with what some of the options we have, just so we don't have
I was just going to clarify that our facilitator from the School of Government is closed. They are allowing their facilitators to do work with their clients and are encouraging that, but they're also encouraging that to be done through distance measures as best as possible. And the facilitator is very concerned about trying to do an adequate job of facilitating the kind of retreat we think you want to have in a distance setting. And I think my guess is that the situation, the likelihood of travel being any better before the 1st is not very likely. And so I think it's going to be difficult for them to facilitate on the 1st. And so if everyone's understanding of that and we can find a time to reschedule the facilitated part, Davenport was going to be added on at the end of that day. And if they can still come on the 31st, we could still get the topics from the work session and Davenport and then figure out when it seems appropriate to have a facilitated retreat.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go right ahead.
Now, I've had facilitators in meeting. Now, what is this facilitator going to do above and beyond what we could do at a planned retreat that staff and everybody has put together? Is that facilitator going to make all that much difference, or can we move forward?
Well, the facilitator was being planned precisely for the part of the retreat that dealt with council relations, relationship, and working, communication, maybe some team building pieces in there, but in particular, and then a discussion about council procedures, because that's, you review those, your plan is review those after every election, so we need to go ahead and do that, but just talk about, council collaboration and working together and those type of things.
I think one of the topics we talked about was...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think one of the topics we mentioned was the roles of staff and the roles of council, clarifying how that works and what the process is to have conversations and so forth. Where does Ms. Altman live? Do we know?
Does she live in Chapel Hill? Okay, I'm not sure where she lives.
I believe she's in the Chapel Hill area.
Okay.
Is there a possibility we could help with her travel expense over here, since it's just one day, it's just driving?
Yeah, I don't think that's the issue. I think it's more of a policy direction. If the school cuts any travel away from their campus, I think that's more the issue, regardless of how close it is. So it's not really a monetary issue.
Being extenuating times and calls for different measures sometimes. I see where you're going with that, and
She used to live in, not too far from here, but east of here, and I didn't know
Well, if we operate on the premise that there's a strong likelihood that she would not be available, seems to me like an option would be to bring Davenport in on the 31st and to delay the other segment of our retreat that was going to be facilitated until such time as she can be available. We don't know at this point how long that would be, but that's just my observation. I know Mr. Matthews was asking about the possibility of doing some of this without the facilitator. Ms. Behringer, I think you'd prefer to see one, go with the original plan.
I think we would benefit tremendously. I've worked with Ms. Altman before over the years, and I think we'd benefit tremendously. I'm fine with, having to postpone it if that's what happens. I just don't want us to leave it off completely.
Okay. Other council members care to weigh in on this issue? Mr.
Thinking, a facilitated discussion, I believe, would do the council well.
Okay, all right.
I agree. I think conversation sort of begs the question related to the next topic on the coronavirus update on what contingency plans we have as a council to even meet in 2 weeks, and whether we're going to try to create some type of virtual opportunity to get together. I know not quite to that point yet, but as things evolve quickly, we should probably start working on plans to continue meeting, but also legally and virtually. That's a legal issue, I'm sure. So I think all these things collide. Planning things 2 weeks out at this day and time seems not worth a lot of discussion, the way things are changing. But I think it kind of begs out of the larger question of us convening and how we're going to do that, period.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say that you support the notion of continuing that portion of the retreat until such time as we can meet as a group and have the facilitator
Yeah.
present. Yeah.
I think we stick to the timeline and try to see how we need to make that happen, even if it's different than we initially anticipate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Singleton, you want to weigh in on that?
You know, facilitator or not doesn't matter to me, really honestly. In regards to Davenport though, we don't need a facilitator for them, and if they can't come, and if we do meet and we can do it virtually, that's fine, because their information is vital.
I agree.
And not only, Mr. Matthews, will they show us one Ouija board, they'll change a percentage here and there, they'll show you a lot of Ouija boards. I mean, they change something by 0.5% or 1%, and all the columns change, so that's just, it's just interesting. Their information is really good information, so I think we all realize that.
Was it Mr. Matthews who made reference to Ouija boards? There may be some of us on this dais that aren't old enough to know what Ouija boards are.
I'm not going to age myself. I'll yield out to my colleagues.
Okay. That's fine. I believe I'm hearing at least a consensus thought about this, Mr. Manager, or John, where'd you go? Yeah, he's down there. Regarding how we should proceed. Do you need any further instruction? Or?
I think it looks like if there's not going to be a facilitator April 1st, it would be prudent to try to blend everything into the 31st, which could mean starting maybe a little earlier than what we had planned, maybe a little earlier than 4. So we'll have to gauge that with Davenport, how much time they might need, and the other items that are going to come before you. So I think we got enough direction to move forward and till we hear definitely from the facilitator.
Gotcha. So the 31st will be our focus, and at this point, we will postpone the April 1st segment of that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, are you ready for item 5?
Yes. So staff has been working in meeting a lot, and participating in calls with other agencies and other local governments in the area as it pertains to COVID-19. As you know, some of the guidelines change from day to day, and we had enacted some cancellations late last week, and over the weekend or over the last couple of days, the guidelines changed again. So we had allowed some rentals that were under 100, gathering of 100. But what we decided after there was talk about the number going to 50, and then I know we've heard in the news here lately about it even going to 10, we just decided to cancel all rentals at our facilities rather than every 2 days going back and making adjustments. So we've done that at the Nature Center, and we had 3 rentals at the Senior Center, and yeah, those were the 2 facilities. I think we had rentals and our shelters. And so we've canceled all of those. We posted those. They should already be posted. If not, they'll be posted soon. That because the park's still open, we're gonna post the shelters that there should be no gatherings that are not consistent with the guidelines, regardless what they are, because they change. So we're encouraging people to follow those guidelines. We've put in some safe workplace practices, like you can see our doors at our conference rooms and meeting areas are posted with some of the guidelines. One of the guidelines is the social distancing, so we've tried to adhere to that here right now. The president did invoke the Stafford Act, and with that, there's a potential to, and what that does is declare official, it's official disaster declaration. So with that, there's a potential to be reimbursed for expenses related to any disaster, including a pandemic. So we have to keep up with expenses, and it's not guaranteed because it depends on the threshold and how widespread the dollar figure of how much the towns have to spend and the county has to spend before we know if we're eligible or not. We've adjusted meetings. We sent out some guidance to staff about teleworking, and we do have some teleworking where it makes sense. It doesn't maybe work for everybody, but we're trying to accommodate the best we can, staff being able to work off-site, and we're trying to, kind of beef up our IT capacity for more staff to do that. Put in a travel restrictions and have closed off any business travel for any staff that were going to conferences, especially if they with potential to be over 100 participants. And so that's happened. And one thing we just recently did, we canceled the lines of business meeting that we have tomorrow, just due to having to change the changing work schedules of staff and department heads, maybe having to be available to maybe answer phones or do some things they don't typically do, and just try to help out the best we can with that, or department heads that may be teleworking or that factor. And on the community side, there was a concern about Meals on Wheels and how that program might go for the senior feeding program. The congregate meal was ended. However, our senior center remains a site for pickup, and they call it grab and go. And so the Meals on Wheels program has accommodated that. It was a concern about some of the residents caught the bus there, and the Meals on Wheels programs has arranged for that to continue for some of those participants. I think they beefed up their volunteers, so they do have folks to deliver more meals for the ones, because with more staying home. And let's see, there was one of the things that happened too over the last couple of days, the wall that Hills was going to be here in the next month, that has been canceled. The Walls that Hills Foundation had canceled some of the previous events, and we felt like they were probably going to cancel ours eventually anyway. However, due to the high participation of participants that are in the risk category, I think the organizers felt like that was the best thing to do, because a lot of the volunteers were in that category, and it felt like the visitors would be in that category too, and you could likely get 50 or more people. Concern about school meals, Wake County has put some guidance out about places that meals can be picked up. I know Creech Road is one. So there's a lot of different organizations that have come together to help make that happen. They have a link on their website that someone can log into and offer up assistance for meals and those type of things. Or one thing they're recommending, donate food to the food bank, those type of things, and they'll get that to needy families.
Or make a cash contribution if you can, so they can purchase food.
Yeah.
The food bank, local area places, yes.
Yes. Yep.
Mr. Manager, I'd like to add also to dovetail right on what you're talking about, not only Creech Road, but also Juniper Level. There's also a location where they are having to grab and go meals for the families with kids in the Wake County Public School System. Juniper Level Missionary Baptist Church.
All right. And that's off of Rock Service Station Road?
It's on Sauls Road.
Sauls Road, yeah.
Sauls Road.
Close in here. Sauls Road, okay. So that puts one on two sides of Garner, so hopefully that'll be easy access for those that need that. And I think that's pretty much it for the update. Any questions or we're still continue to talk about other things we could be doing to help out and with staff, so yeah.
I have a question, twofold question. What is the determining factor and threshold point for shutting down Town Hall? And what does that look like in terms of continuing essential services?
Yeah, we're talking about that. Department heads are preparing what they think are essential services. I know several communities have shut down their town hall. And basically what they've done, they've closed the doors to the public. They still have employees working there. We have not, and I have not recommended that yet. I think we've encouraged citizens to pay their bills and bill pay in other ways. We have signs on the door. We actually have witnessed folks coming to the door and then turning around and putting it in a drop box. So we're just following the guidelines best we can, and I think that's probably a day-to-day
Does there
decision.
come a point where we stop having staff come in?
I think the difficulty there, and I don't know exactly how some of the other communities are dealing with it, but there's still some legislative requirements that we do certain functions like inspections, and we are encouraging the field staff to just come in long enough to get what they need and stay out and do that, but we still are required to do inspections. Right now, we're still taking walk-up customers for bill pay. The good thing is the city of Raleigh is forgiving, not forgiving, but they've halted their cutoff program and are giving people opportunity if they're late or whatever to pay. So that's the good thing. So maybe we won't have folks just rushing in to pay their bill. But it's something we continue to talk about, and I don't think we're there yet. Not everybody's closing town hall, but you know, something to consider.
I believe that would be an issue that you could recommend back to the council if that's to happen, unless this council wants to defer strictly to your judgment about shutting down, but I would think council might want to weigh in on that.
One of the things we want to make sure is that if there are some essential functions that they can be done away at home through teleworking, or we make some provisions for some things to continue on. So, but.
I guess I speak for council. I just want, you're making the decisions based on the public safety, and I know you will, and I wanted to make sure we all feel the same way.
Yeah, we, in dealing with all of this, there's a lot of talk about keeping the public safe too, but we definitely want to be aware that we got to, keep staff safe also as they do the work of the people and the public. So we're definitely take that in consideration. And I think staff was very thankful for council allowing the administrative leave, as needed. So we'll utilize that, and with some of those measures, we think we're in pretty good shape. So.
Okay, anybody else questions? That was your last item, so you're finished?
Yeah, I think so. Did I miss anything that needed update? Okay. That was my last item.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Baggett? Yes, sir. Okay. Council reports. I'll start with Mr. Singleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank staff for the meeting we had on Sunday, the emergency meeting that was called to update us and also update the public, since it was streamed live, and also it was on our website and social media for people to follow. If they have questions, I appreciate that. A couple people contacted me and said they watched it. So I appreciate taking the time to get organized, people to hear. They just want to hear what's going on, because you hear nationwide, you hear statewide, but here in Wake County, we've got 12 municipalities who are doing similar things, but maybe not the exact same thing. So I appreciate the meeting and the information that was got out there, because somebody said they appreciated the fact that police and fire both had plans. If something happens, they've got something in place right now. That if they have to sit, take several members of either one of those departments and have to be quarantined. So appreciate that information.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Behringer, I'll go to you next.
Yes, sir. I think we all got an invitation at our table tonight to a big reveal at the Capitol Church on Sunday the 29th. That has been canceled, and these apparently were mailed before that announcement was made. So they will announce when they're going to have it at a future date. They've remodeled the original sanctuary, and so wanted to invite us to see that, but that has been postponed. And I also wanted to thank Public Works. They went out Saturday and cut back all of the brush, the ragged looking stuff on the property at 70 and Timber by Verizon. They removed the underground platform, gas platform a few weeks ago, and then they went out Saturday and cleaned all the bordering brush, and it looks much, much nicer. Getting comments already about it, how clean it looks, so good, big deal. Thanks for Public Works.
Okay, I'll keep going this way, Mr. Vance.
Yes, I also like to thank Public Works for going out and looking into a citizen concern pertaining to a drainage ditch that was of some concern for the property owner. Appreciate them going out and doing that, and like to also emphasize what the town manager mentioned about the meals for those individuals with kids in Wake County Public Schools. We heard the numbers. We heard the numbers given to us by Attorney Bridges in reference to those individuals who have free and reduced lunch. So we have, if you know some folks who need to get the family's food there, I know that at the pick up and go locations, they will be able to get a lunch meal and a breakfast meal. And so I just strongly recommend that we tell those who are in need that these locations are available for them. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Dellinger next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll submit these to the town clerk later. I've had a lot of conversations with members of the community, particularly the business community, small business community here in Garner, and people are anxious and worried. There's a post from Alosi Spa just this afternoon at almost 6 o'clock, right before we got here, about the difficult decision that was made to close shop and how hard it was, worrying about employees, with the bars and restaurants closed now for pickup only. People are feeling the anxiety of that situation. So I had a conversation this afternoon with Matt over at the Chamber, the new president, about ideas of things to do, and I had this idea over the weekend, and the idea is for the town to match $20,000 for a small business resiliency fund for the town to do, for there to be made available microloans, the logistics of which we could figure out. Small businesses are particularly going to be affected by this. There will be federal and state aid. A lot of that, however, is in the form of loans, which either small businesses maybe not be eligible for or can't absorb into their finances. So the idea would be to create this fund to get some public investment, and the town match that when that threshold is met, and then have a committee form that could disperse those funds to small businesses that serve in Garner and serve Garner. It's not a lot, but I think it speaks to how Garner comes together, brings partners together. I think it demonstrates how we value our small businesses in Garner. And I think a few $100s here and there for a small business can help make a lease payment or keep an employee on a little bit longer. So the sort of ask tonight from council is sort of a conditional approval for that. You have the proposal. We engage partners over the course of the week and next couple weeks and flesh out all the details, and then come back to council with that fleshed out program and partnerships, and get the actual final approval for the funds. That's what I have.
So, yeah, if I'm understanding you, and we talked about this briefly, no particular action needed tonight. You wanted to give this as information, and would this be a topic you would anticipate maybe for our work session coming up?
Yeah, whatever at the end of the month we want to do. And again, procedurally, I'm not sure if we need to make a motion to have a conditional approval, or I don't know any of that stuff, because I'm the new guy, so.
Well, I think if we're asking the town to expend funds, we'll have to take some formal action. Am I right on that?
You are correct. I mean, I think the one thing we probably need to do first is just make sure statutorily we can do that. And I know we can do economic development, so there may be a way to do it through the economic development program. And then I think we got to, flesh out the criteria and who's going to administer and those type of details. So some things we'll work out with the chamber and the town attorney and economic development.
I've some more fleshed out,
yeah,
and had a conversation or two sensitive to those issues, and
Okay.
Also, a couple of things as I read through here is what would be a cap, would there be a cap on what you gave a business? And how many times could a business apply for assistance? Is it just a one-time cap, a one-time application to try to get some additional funding to assist? So that's just a couple of things that I've thought about because Damien's mentioned 20,000. If the community can match it, that's 40. So we're talking $400, $500, $600. I don't know what if you got the
Yeah,
numbers.
those were some of the details, I think, when you sort of start to form your committee that would make those decisions to say it's a 200, 500, 1,000. You can apply once, maybe you can apply again later if there are funds available. I think those are the kind of details we want to flesh out with partners based on what kind of feedback you're getting from the need of the community. So this isn't a definitive outline of what the program would be. That would come later after talking with partners and seeing what makes sense, and then getting a feedback again once it comes before council as to whether or not those make sense and whether the partnerships, I guess, be in touch with the attorney in the meantime to figure out the best placement of different elements of the partnerships.
Okay. You may have dropped one off in my desk. I have so many papers here, I didn't see it. So
Oh.
just make sure I get a copy. Yeah, it's
You
coming
passed
now.
it to
Okay.
him.
Thank you. I wanted to get that. Okay, is that it, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let's see, the mayor will defer at this point in time. No particular comments. Maybe when we come back from our closed session, I'll have one. So I believe we are at the point now where we are ready to go into closed session, and I know there is one item listed, but I believe, do we have an add-on?
There's an add-on, yes. We need
Can we get a
one for the real
statutory
estate item listed and one for legal counsel.
Okay.
What's the other statute, Mr. Baggett?
143-318.11, little a in parentheses, 1 and
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I move we go into closed session per the statutes as stated by our attorney, Mr. Baggett, and also the statute stated here on our agenda.
Second.
Okay.
And we thought we'd just stay in here since we already spread out and all of that, and pretty much staff here so we can dismiss and have the relevant ones stay. So.
No problem with that. So we have a motion probably before us to go into closed session to discuss these two items. Did I get a second on that? I believe I did.
Yes, you did.
Okay, probably seconded. Okay, council, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Okay. Adjourn the open session and officially, thank you, Joe, and your staff. Okay, we are back in open session. The council went into closed session to discuss a couple of items. The first one was a real estate matter that was discussed and options related to that, but the council took no formal action at this time. The second item had to do with a legal matter that the council discussed, and the council gave staff some direction but took no formal action at this time. So there is one final item, I believe, before I ask for adjournment, and I'll recognize Councilmember Dellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted clarification on the investigating the virtual coming together issue for council, so that, I mean, we're not meeting for 2 weeks, but that we have something in place by that time so that if we need to resort to that, that we do that.
Yeah, we'll look into it. There's been some back and forth about whether that's allowed and whether you got to have some council members present, and it's okay if some are not, but.
Yeah, as an initial piece of information, the current legal thinking in the state from the School of Government and among city attorneys is you can participate by telephone or video conference in a council meeting. However, it is highly advisable and maybe even surely necessary, not sure, but it's highly advisable to have a quorum of the council physically present. And for your group, that means 4. To determine a quorum with 5 council people and a mayor, even though the mayor only votes in the case of a tie, you have 6 members, 6 members. So you got to get a majority of the number 6, which means 4. So I don't know how much that would help. If 4 of you've got to be here, only 2 could call in. So I wanted to get that out as an initial piece of information.
Okay. Yes.
Now, you could take a chance and do it all by teleconference, but it's right now it's not deemed advisable. Now, there's a possibility, I talked to the league today about legislative issues that may come up in the short session. I mean, it's too soon to know how much appetite the legislature is going to have for any issues except their own burning needs concerning the budget because of the political situation, and also they don't want to meet any longer than they have to. But one thought is maybe clarify the ability to meet completely electronically, to have legal meetings without being physically present as a possible way to operate in this virus environment. But that's speculative, whether there'll be a change. Certainly won't be a change in the immediate future.
Question from Mr. Baggett. Thank you very much. And he and I had discussed this some time back, and I knew that was the position that we'd have to have at least 4 people here present. And I would agree to be one of them, but we'd have to work on that. So he answered your question?
Yes.
What's the second item, sir?
Yeah, one quick thing. There's also a lot of concern for, over the next few weeks, for seniors in the community and their isolation and reaching out to them. And I've worked with some other volunteers and members of the community to pull together information on how many seniors there are in Garner. So how many do we have that are high risk? So I just want to have numbers to pass out to council, just of interest, so you can see kind of what the size of that population is. And we're going to work on some projects to make sure that if people want to visit them and check in on them over the next several weeks, if it comes to a certain level of situation, that we're gathering the data and the means for people to be able to do that. So that's all.
Okay, and as part of that number, by the way, I'm sure I would assume that covers certainly people in their own homes, but also those who are in care facilities. And it's my understanding right now that I think probably all care facilities have locked down and
They are,
don't allow any
Mr. Mayor.
visitations.
I know personally one, Longdale is locked down.
So this would have to apply to people who are not in those circumstances, I'm sure, but okay. Okay, was that it, Mr. Tellinger? Okay. All right, just before we adjourn, I want to take a moment, Mayor's privilege, to thank this council for their willingness to come out. There could have been some reasons to potentially cancel tonight's meeting, but we decided not to do that, and I think that's wise. And to the citizens of Garner, I would say there are a lot of issues we're dealing with at this time. I believe your council and your town staff are working well together and doing all we can to help us all move through this very difficult time. I have full confidence that we'll continue to do those things that we think are in the safety and best interest of all of our citizens, and we ask for your patience and indulgence, I guess I should say, as we obviously have canceled many things and are closing facilities. But as soon as we get to a point where we can revisit those issues and certainly loosen some of these restrictions, we'll be happy to do that. Thank you all. And so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it is unanimous. This meeting